Hello and welcome to my first vlog. I'm making this in order to put my thoughts down on video rather than actually write them out longhand. I think it might be easier to explain what I'm thinking about my degree using a vlog than I would have done just writing. So let's see if this works. So welcome along for the ride. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is sort of the journey that I've taken since 2012 when I started my degree through to where I actually am now, because there's been a lot of twists and turns in the road. When I very first started my degree, I was very much a sort of vanilla photographer. I took very pretty pictures. I thought photography was all about taking pictures in the camera and making it all very kind of perfect, very camera clubby. Beautiful pictures and all that sort of thing. And my very first tutor was Sharon Boothroyd, who regularly beat me around the head for taking these pretty pictures and really not thinking through what I was taking pictures of or why I was taking pictures. And I was doing a lot of the things that usually people do, which is, seeing people take a certain picture. So everyone sees someone take a picture of a spider's web with a dew on it, so off they go and do that. And, it's the Ansel Adams syndrome, isn't it, where everybody goes and puts their tripod in the same 3 holes that Ansel Adams used to take a picture of Yosemite Park. This degree is very much about not being like that. It's about actually kind of expressing yourself. And I didn't appreciate much of that when I started. It's taken a long time for my appreciation to shift. When I first started this degree, I thought things like Tracy Emin's Unmade Bed were sort of nonsense. I didn't really get it. I certainly didn't get surrealism, and I didn't get people like Hannah Hock. I went to an exhibition at the Whitechapel Gallery of Hannah Hock's work, and at the time, it was back in 2012, probably, maybe 13. At the time, I didn't really understand what they were getting at, or what that was all about. It just seemed rather strange, people cutting out pictures and sticking them together. There was no kind of rhyme or reason to it to me. I didn't really have the visual literacy to understand those kinds of works. That's changed quite a lot now. Actually changed an awful lot this year, but we'll come on to that in a minute. I think one of the worst things that ever happened to me was early on, back in 2012, we went to the Brighton Biennial, and everybody was talking about finding their voice. And I became a bit obsessed with this idea that you've got to find your voice. Now, a couple of the tutors, Jessie being one of them, I think, and probably Sharon as well, sort of said, "Oh, don't worry about your voice, it'll come, don't think about that now." I remember Gareth saying the same thing back then, that we shouldn't be looking at our voice now, we should not think about it. And I didn't appreciate how important that was. In fact, I think it was really, I've been obsessed with finding my voice for 8 years. And it's actually had the effect of keeping me away from finding a voice. I think it's made it harder. I think for anybody that's starting out, you should ignore that word, you should ignore that thought, and keep away from the idea of finding a voice. Because it's true, it will come to you eventually, but it won't come if you search it. It's like anything, if you chase after it, it'll escape you. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and I didn't really understand myself well enough to even have a voice. And my work has changed a lot over the years. As I said, I was very sort of picture perfect, chocolate box, jigsaw puzzle type photographer when I started. And when I look at what I do now, it's so far from that. I've got to a point where I can't put pictures in camera club competitions because they don't accept that sort of picture, because I'm a bit out there now. There were a few breakthroughs for me. I think some of the key things that happened to me early on was the first person I found was Kirsty Mitchell with her Wonderland series. Kirsty was a massive influence on me. When I first saw her work, I was absolutely blown away by it. Kirsty's one of the 3 key individuals that have affected my photography the most. Her photography is, I call her my stage dresser. In my mind, she's the one who influences me with stage dressing, because Kirsty's working practice is to build elaborate sets and props and clothes and things, and set up these wonderful scenes where she takes pictures based on all this beautiful stuff that she makes, and she'll take 6 months to a year to make the setup and to make the clothes up, and probably spend an awful lot of money along the way. A few years back, all I wanted to do was make a book like Wonderland. Obviously, emulating somebody else isn't really the right thing to do, but I was absolutely aghast by this work that she was doing. Along the way, I also then discovered Derek Gallen, who not everybody's heard of, but I first saw him when he got his fellowship to the Royal Photographic Society, and he was featured in the RPS magazine. His work was based around old masters, and he was doing an homage to some of the Dutch masters. And when I first saw his work, I couldn't get my head around how he was doing it or what he was doing. In my head, when I first saw it, he was putting some sort of filter on it to make it look like an oil painting, because his work is quite clearly photography, but it looks like an oil painting. And it was only when I discovered an article he wrote about how he made the tavern scene that I realised what he was doing. And so he was using the principle of chiaroscuro. Did I say that right? Chiaroscuro. He was using the principle of chiaroscuro to light his subjects. And so what he was doing was taking the scene and breaking it into parts, putting the people together and lighting them separately. If you're an oil painter, you paint each thing in your scene the way you see it. You're not actually using light to fall on the thing to paint it, are you? You might be painting the light you've seen, but you're not reliant on the lights like we are as photographers. As photographers, we've got to put the lights in a certain place, and they fall as they fall. And obviously the skill is to set the lights up in a certain way. What I found with the work that Derek was doing was he was actually separating his image into parts and placing the light how he wanted each part to be seen, and it was giving it that beautiful darks and bright parts that oil paintings have. And then he was compositing the pieces back together and creating these wonderful images. That sort of blew me away as well, and I wanted to do that too. The third person I found, the third of my three muses, is Brooke Shaden, who I've been very lucky enough last year to meet at a workshop. She's an absolutely lovely lady, and she's one of the most giving people I've ever come across, sharing everything with you. So Derek is my lighting specialist, if you like, and Brooke is my painter. Again, when I very first saw her, I couldn't understand how she made the work she made. And the good thing about Brooke, the wonderful thing about Brooke, is she makes an endless sea of videos about how she does what she does. I first saw her on Creative Live, where I bought some courses by her, and I've since joined her YouTube channel and what have you, and that she has a lot of work out there showing you how she does what she does. And the secret to Brooke's work is compositing, bringing together textures, colour tones, and actually really editing the picture. Her actual photography is fairly basic, which is wonderful. So she mostly shoots herself, and she does it fairly simply. She'll go out to a scene and she'll set the camera up, and she has a remote control, and she jumps around and snaps herself, and then she pulls all the various pictures together. The other thing about Brooke is she does a lot of editing in Photoshop, but it's quite crude. I mean, it's beautifully crude. The work that she does looks amazing when it's finished. But she doesn't use... She says herself she's not sort of a purist in Photoshop that uses really complex methods to do these things. She just does what she needs to do to make the image work. And of course the results are absolutely outstanding. So I see her as a painter. She paints it all together by, cutting, pasting, masking, putting textures over the top, masking them out, and creating these absolutely beautiful images. So I found all three of those quite a while ago now, and it's taken me a very long time to get my head around what I'm liking here. I read an article that was talking about photography, and it used the two terms photo fact and photo fiction, and that was part of what opened up my thinking. The idea of something being photo fiction as opposed to photo fact. Photo fact is documentary, And to me, that's the opposite side of photography. That is not me at all. I don't enjoy documentary photography. I'm not somebody who wants to go out and snap the news or anything like that. That's not my bag at all. I would rather put a dragon in a picture and take something that's more Lord of the Rings than News at 10. So that's where I am now, really, is that I'm heavily into fantasy. That's probably worth discussing a bit as well. So other influences on my life. When I was very young, yeah, I was at school, and our English teacher was away, and we had the humanities teacher came in for the day, and rather than do very much with us because he wasn't an English teacher, he set us a comprehension from this book. And the comprehension was a passage from a text that we had to read, and then we had to finish the story. And the passage was actually a passage from Lord of the Rings. It's that part where Frodo and Sam and Gollum are approaching Mordor. And I read this, and it just blew me away as a piece of English. The pictures that it conjured in my head were fantastical, really. And at that time, I think I was probably... How old was I? 12? Something like that. I had never really read anything like that, and I wasn't really reading very many big novels. I'd been very much into sort of Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigator type books, which are fairly thin books, fairly easy reading, and I'd read a lot of those. And I said to my mum, "Oh, can you get me this book called Lord of the Rings?" expecting this small paperback to come back. Anyway, she turned up at the house with the book, and it turned out to be 3 extremely thick volumes, which I avidly sat down and read cover to cover over a period of time. I got so obsessed with that book, I've read it so many times now. I think by the time I was 19, I'd read it over 19 times. But one of the things that was really magical about that book, the first time I was reading it, I got ill. I had a boil on one of my ears, which was incredibly painful. And I was laid up in bed, not able to sleep, in absolute agony. And my dad came in to me, and he was sort of, obviously trying to make me feel better. And I said, "I can't sleep, Dad. And it's just so painful, I can't sleep." He said, "Don't try." He said, "Take your book and read it." I thought, okay. So I started reading The Lord of the Rings. He said, "When you're tired enough, you'll fall asleep." And I literally read and read and read. Most nights I was up nearly all night reading that book. And for some reason, that drew me closer to my dad and closer to that book. It's my favourite book in the world. And it sparked an incredible passion for fantasy. After that, I discovered lots of other fantasy writers, and I've always read fantasy fiction. I discovered Marvel, and the sort of the comics with the Marvel characters in. I'm really into that side of things as well, graphic novels. But very much fantasy was a big part of my life, and I was avidly buying and reading every book I could find on fantasy. One of the things that happens when you start reading fantasy is you start noticing the cover art on the books. And I was noticing some of this beautiful artwork that was being created on the front of these books, and I found Boris Vallejo, who's this genius artist, makes all the work. He did all the Conan books and many others as well. And I was really into him as an artist. I thought he was fantastic. And this is sort of is all of this has kind of funneled my thinking into this whole fantasy genre. I'm at a point now, and I started doing digital image and culture this year in January. I had a bit of a traumatic time over the last 3 or 4 years. I lost my parents and various other things happened, and I got quite ill with diabetes and what have you. So my landscape module took far too long, and I had to extend it. And I almost got thrown off the course for taking too long. But luckily they were very, very kind and accepted my mitigating circumstances. And I ended up with a very short deadline on finishing landscape and then doing digital image and culture, which is sort of a shame because it's actually my favourite module that I've ever done. If you've not tried it, I recommend it highly. It's wonderful if you're at all creative. And so I've gone through this magical journey over the last few months where I've been able to combine my love of fantasy, my love of graphic novels and of Marvel and the Avengers and all that sort of thing, which I know is popular on in films at the moment, but it was popular with me as a sort of a graphic novel long before it was on the films on the TV. And all those things have come together with my study for digital image and culture. I've also at the same time started working in photography and graphic arts, and I've got quite good with 3D modelling. I'm using DAZ Studio, so my work has gone from pure photography. When I started, I was a photographer, and now I struggle to say I'm just a photographer. I'm a sort of I say fine art photographer. I don't know what that means anymore, but I'm into digital art really. So I like to blend the work from a 3D studio with photography and a bit of digital painting as well. So I'm taking on board some of the things that I've learnt from looking at Kirsty Mitchell, which is props and sets and taking pictures. Very much the lighting side of things from Derek Gallen, and quite a lot of the stuff that Brooke Shaden does with layers and masks and textures and that sort of thing, and building up pictures, and I've added into that 3D models from 3D Studio, so I can create everything from people to dragons and unicorns and goodness knows what, and have done, and I'm blending all those things together. I have no idea where my art is going yet, but it is taking an interesting journey, and this module has been absolutely an incredible boost, because I've gone from very mundane photography to really exploring some very strange things. I will talk about it in another video shortly, but it's made me discover surrealism again in a totally different way. It's made me look at Hannah Hock completely differently, and I guess I now appreciate Tracy Emin, which I never did before. So I feel that as an artist and a photographer, I've grown significantly in the last 8 months that I've been doing this module. It's been amazing. I wish it'd been like this all the way along, and I wish I'd never started looking for my voice. I still don't know what that is, but one day I'll have it, and I think that actually when I start to look at the work I'm making now, something is appearing, but I'm not actually trying to make it into anything special. Thank you for watching. It's been a bit of a ramble, but thank you again, and I'll talk to you again in the next vlog. Thank you.